Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Pittsburgh. It is July 9th, 2023. I am Stephanie Pulowski, commissioned lay minister with this church. I'm in my mid-40s with curly, brownish, some gray hair, glasses, and I am wearing a black and white striped dress. I use she, her pronouns. With me today is guest speaker and longtime member Jim Reitz. Our minister, Reverend Kate Walker, is off today. Jim has his bachelor's and master's in sociology and graduated from Garrett Theological Seminary with a master's in theology. He has been a member of First Unitarian Church for 38 years, during which he has been board president, co-chair of the Capitol campaign that put in the elevator and our garden lobby. He coordinates the men's group, and he served on the search committee that brought us Reverend Kate. It is wonderful to have Jim back in the pulpit with us again this morning. We are so glad that you have chosen to be with us this morning. We are one people of many beliefs, many origins, sexualities, and genders. We are all growing, all learning, all loved. Just as you are welcome here. We are working for justice wherever the heavy weight of oppression has dug into the fabric of life. I have with me today volunteers and staff, all working to bring this worship to you. On behalf of our entire team, thank you for being with us. If this is your first time with us, we would love to be in touch with you. If you have not already done so, please go to our welcome desk in the atrium, or if you're on YouTube, visit our website. Just Google First Unitarian of Pittsburgh and sign up for our weekly newsletter at the bottom of the page. You are also invited to join us for social time on Zoom following the live worship. To get a Zoom link, please send an email to firstunitarianpittsburgh@gmail.com. It is nice to have so many people in the sanctuary this morning. It's the start of Summer Institute for the UUA today, so we were anticipating not many people, and it's nice to have so many of you here. I invite you to take a deep breath. Arrive in body and spirit, and picture yourself connected to all others who are watching today and in the future. We turn now to our chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. If you have a chalice at home, we invite you to light it at this time. In the words of Cynthia Landrum, as we kindle this flame, may it spark in each of us connection and commitment to this living tradition and to each other. May this flame burn bright in your heart and mind as we worship together.
Call to worship this morning is written by Ian W. Riddle. Come wherever you are. Do you hear that voice calling you, calling us? That voice which calls us together here today in this room, made special by our presence and by the breath we share in our singing and speaking and silence. That voice which calls us to remember that we are not alone and that we are inextricably linked to all other forms of life, woven into a vast tapestry of existence of which we are a powerful, integral, and inseparable part. And just as we've been called together here today, we act as the voice, the heart, the hands of another call. For this we are here together today. So my friends, come, yet come again. Come, let us meditate together.
Please rise in body or spirit and join me in singing our opening hymn, hymn 149, Lift Every Voice and Sing. For the story for all this morning, the story is called Supporting the People Who Need Us by Mandy Neff. I want to tell you a story about being new and how sometimes it's fun and sometimes it's not. Once there was a second grader named Paul. In September, he moved to a new town, had a new teacher and a new class and a brand new desk. And he was excited to meet some new friends, but a little nervous too. There was a boy sitting across from him with bright red hair, and his name was Ryan. That first day, Ryan told Paul a knock-knock joke, and he was really funny. So that first day was a good day. On the second day, 3 other boys came up to Ryan, and he thought, oh, great, they want to make friends with me too. But that wasn't what happened. All 3 boys and Ryan came up and started poking Paul and calling him names. He looked at his friend Ryan. Ryan didn't want to hear what was going on. So what do you think he did? Well, what he did was this. And he stuck his fingers in his ears so he wouldn't hear what the boys were saying. That second day was not a good day. But the third day was even worse. Because the 3 boys came up to Paul at lunchtime and they stole his lunch. And he didn't have anything to eat. Well, the 4th day, Paul didn't come to school at all. The 3 boys were cheering that day because Paul wasn't there. And even though he didn't want to, Ryan heard them planning mean things that they were going to do to Paul when he came back. But this time, Ryan didn't stick his fingers in his ears. Instead, he told the teacher. And when Paul came back to school and there was recess, the 3 boys came around. Paul was nervous, but then the teacher came around too. And Ryan said, come on, come play with me, Paul. And that day was the best day of all, because Paul and Ryan became best friends. And so my hope for all of the children, when you hear something you'd rather not hear, and for us adults as well, is that we don't stick our fingers in our ears. I hope that when you see or hear someone that needs your help, or see or hear something that is wrong, that you find a way to stand up and support someone who needs you. We do not have religious education this summer for our children, so instead we're just going to sing them here, if there are any here. So please join me in singing hymn 346, Come Sing a Song with Me.
Song with me that
So I think that's a sign that after service today, we should all go for a walk in the rain together. Please join me in our collective reading, the current UUA principles, which if you follow General Assembly are going to be changing, but let's read them together. We covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience, and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Turning now to our offering, every morning we share our generosity with a designated organization. This month it is Planned Parenthood of Western Pennsylvania. All donations are shared 50-50 with this organization unless otherwise designated. I would like to now invite Karen Burns up to introduce our guest speaker from Western PA Planned Parenthood.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to be representing our Share the Plate Committee, and I would like to tell you about Tiffany Jimenez, who is the Vice President of Development for Planned Parenthood of Western Pennsylvania, a position she's held since March of 2021. In her role, Tiffany is responsible for overseeing the Planned Parenthood of Western Pennsylvania's fundraising, marketing, and external communications programs. She is a development professional with 25 years of experience in fundraising for human and social services organizations, arts, healthcare nonprofits, and independent schools. She has successfully created and implemented marketing campaigns for the Campus Lab at Carlow University, Wesley Family Services, the United Way of Allegheny County, Highmark's Caring Place, and August Wilson Center for African American Culture, and the Northside Christian Health Center. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in marketing from Wilberforce University in Ohio and an MBA from Point Park University. Please join me in welcoming Tiffany Jimenez.
Good morning. I first want to start off by thanking Karen and the First Unitarian Church of Pittsburgh for inviting me here today. I also want to thank all of you for coming this morning on behalf of your congregation. As Karen said, since starting my role with Planned Parenthood in March of 2021, a lot has changed around reproductive health and reproductive justice in this country, and more importantly, abortion care. A little over a year ago, the Supreme Court of the United States made a devastating decision to overturn Roe versus Wade, eliminating 50 years of legal precedents and ending the federal protection to abortion rights in this country. Since that decision, the effects have been swift and far-reaching. Not only did some states place laws that would trigger restrictions immediately once Roe was overturned, but they continue to pass laws that not only make it harder for women and individuals with uteruses to receive abortion care, it also makes it harder for them to receive basic gynecological and preventative care. We are not in a minority on this issue. Just as some states have attempted to pass constitutional amendments saying that there's no right to abortion in their states, we have seen the residents of those states stand up and take a stance on this issue. States such as Kansas, Kentucky, and Montana overwhelmingly voted against those restrictions in their constitutions. And states like California, Michigan, and Vermont voted to secure the right to abortion in their states by adding it to their constitution amendments. So we are not alone on this, and we are not in the minority. As I began to dig deeper into the Unitarian Universalist Church's position on abortion, reproductive health, and reproductive justice, I was overtaken with emotions of gratitude for your support on these issues. The fact that the Unitarian Universalist Church Association, was the first religious denomination to formally support a woman's right to choose in 1963, a full 10 years before Roe became the law of the land, and the fact that this organization was part of the amicus brief that spurred that law is awe-inspiring. Similar to the beliefs of the Unitarian Universalist Church, Planned Parenthood of Western Pennsylvania believes in the fundamental right of individuals to manage their fertility, their sexual and reproductive health without regards to income, marital status, race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, gender expression, age, national origin, or residence. We believe that sexual and reproductive self-determination must be voluntary and preserve an individual's right to privacy. For those unfamiliar with Planned Parenthood of Western Pennsylvania, we have been serving this community for over 90 years. What started as women coming together to fight anti-obscenity laws in the region turned into a place for education, learning, and eventually access to contraceptives, sexual and reproductive health care services, and abortion care. Today at Planned Parenthood of Western Pennsylvania, we provide more than 10,000 healthcare visits annually through our abortion clinic, which is downtown Pittsburgh, and through our 6 family planning health centers located in Bridgeville, downtown Pittsburgh, Moon Township, Somerset, and Greensburg. Our services range from gynecological care, including birth control services, Pap exams, cervical cancer screenings, HPV testing, and testing for sexually transmitted infections, to gender-affirming care, and of course, abortion services. Not only do we provide healthcare services, but our education department also provides fact-based, age-appropriate, comprehensive sexuality education to school-age youth, to professionals training, to youth service providers, community workshops, and support of parents across this region. Sorry, page got stuck. At Planned Parenthood, we understand that the attacks on reproductive rights don't happen in a vacuum. The Supreme Court decision not only infringed on abortion rights, but it has also opened the door to attacks on other issues essential to our movement, such as reproductive and economic justice, LGBTQIA rights, voting rights, and climate change, to name a few. At a time when it feels like so many institutions have turned their backs on women, people of color, the LGBTQIA+ community, individuals, youths, and other marginalized populations, we must step up to support these groups now more than ever. We are grateful that the Unitarian Universalist Church have and continues to meet the moment by being actively involved in these issues at a time when so much is at stake for us all. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today and for being a fierce partner in this movement.
Our religious community is made up of volunteers and staff creating and hosting a variety of programming. We rely on your financial support. In addition to the collection plate, you can donate by texting GIVE to 412-435-1050 and following the directions. Please check at the end of the order of service for more directions. And again, all donations this month will be divided 50-50 with Planned Parenthood of Western Pennsylvania. We hold each other in our hearts and minds with all our joys and all our sorrows. Please keep M.R. Kelsey in your prayers. She fell on her front stairs yesterday and broke her arm. Although they're not anticipating surgery, she is at Shadyside Hospital and will remain there until her pain is under control. Also, please keep Jen Lehman's mother, Kathy Macariello, and the entire Macariello and Lehman family in your prayers. Kathy had cancer surgery on Wednesday on her leg. Jen is with her through tomorrow to assist in caring. She is home, but is facing an uncertain future. We remember those who are experiencing losses of various kinds and those facing health challenges. We are aware that many are faced with heightened difficulties presented by these times that continue to be challenging for us all. May those who suffer or mourn find peace. May those who hunger or thirst be quenched with nourishment and sated with the elixir of life. May those who have experienced violence find care and comfort and the healing that only comes with time. May all of us find the loving kindness that is ours to share. May we open our hearts and minds to encircle with love and care in all our community and beyond. So may it be. Amen. Namaste, and blessed be. You are invited into a few moments of silence, personal meditation, and prayer. In the words of Liz Weber, Spirit of life, help us to be present with all that is our life, both our deepest sorrows and our greatest joys, so that we can truly live, engaging fully in our own life and in our community. Spirit of community, help us know how linked we are, how each one of us cares, touches us all. Help us to ask for support when we are in need and offer our support to others when we are able, so that we may rest in the solace of one another's love. Spirit of love, help us to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, so we might fully embody love and resist hatred. Spirit of resistance, help us stick up for what is right, even when we are tired or afraid. Help us to dream of the world as it should be and act to bring that world about. Help us to find hope each day. Spirit of hope, help us through this day and each and every day. Help us to be present for all that is our life. For all this we pray. Amen.
The reading this morning is entitled Poetry. It's part of a section of a much longer piece by a poet, Claire Shaw. We speak out because it is the right thing for us to do and for the world, and because in poetry we have a uniquely powerful vehicle for giving form to those realities which might otherwise go beyond words. In poetry, we don't only have words and their entire social and political history, we have their landscape and the rise and fall of every letter. We have the cultural and personal histories inscribed there, the associations, the connotations. We have those words and their infinite combinations. We have breath, texture, shape, rhythm, space, song, pattern, geometry. We have line break and stanza and layout and form. We have music. We have the silence between words and what is whispered within. We have the scream of the white page, the word of negative space. We have the entire language of punctuation, the precise personality of the full stop, the gentle, steady semicolon, the careless comma, the impudent dash. In that visceral, textured world of poetry, I can write from every part of myself, heart, body, brain, guts, through a deep immersion in the particular reality I want to convey. I do not believe in silence. I believe in telling what you have seen. I believe in the political imperative to speak out about silenced issues, especially, but not exclusively, those that have affected me. To speak on behalf of the silenced, I am motivated by a deep belief in, if not the obligation, the ability, bearing witness, particularly to that which would otherwise go unacknowledged. It's a privilege, an honor, and somewhat scary to be invited back into this pulpit. A couple of months ago, a couple of members of the congregation asked if I would repeat a sermon that I had given about maybe 5 or 6 years ago. In a weak moment, I said yes. However, when I looked at my copy of that old sermon, I saw a number of things that no longer fit. Life moves on. I recognized several experiences I've had very recently that needed to be added. So it's not quite the same sermon. A few pieces will be the same. A number of other things have changed since 5 or 6 years ago. We now have YouTube. I have 4 children. They're presently in upstate New York, and Boston, Portugal, Rehoboth Beach. And they might watch this. Probably not, but they might. So I had to take out all those parts of the sermon that denigrated some of the things they did when they were growing up. And YouTube has one other change. Any of you who remember the 5 or 6 times I've spoken here before, I never liked to be tied to the pulpit. I used to walk around and stage, but I can't do that and be off camera. So that's another change. "55 years ago, I was the assistant director of a Methodist mountain mission project in southeastern Kentucky. That, in spring, in April of that year, 1968, the executive director, Bob, and myself drove in our little red Volkswagen bus, which was the missions vehicle, to North Carolina, to a retreat center that the Methodist Church owned there, where they set up a workshop for people in leadership positions of Methodist mission projects around the southeastern part of the United States. We had a 2-day workshop. It was very effective. As we were winding down toward the end of the last day, the door suddenly opened in the back. A man stepped in and he spoke up very loudly and said, "Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt your program, but I thought you might want to know that Dr. Martin Luther King was just assassinated." Obviously, that brought to a complete halt our workshop. We sat around and talked about it and eventually retired. The next morning, Bob and I got in our car and headed back to southeastern Kentucky. After quite a period of time, Bob said to me, "I've been hoping we'd run into a little town before long, but we don't seem to be, and we're very low on gas. I see a rural gas station just ahead. I think we need to stop, get gas." So we did. We filled up and we went in, bought a few snacks, and we were paying. And as we were finishing paying, the proprietor, who was the only one in there at the time, said, "I guess you fellows heard somebody finally shot that black preacher," not the adjectives he used, "and it's about time." We went back to our car, and we drove in silence for quite a while. And then Bob turned to me and said, "I'm so angry at what that man said." And I replied, "I'm even more angry that we didn't say anything." He has the privilege, if he chooses, to go home tonight or go to social gatherings and say, "I said this to everybody who came in my store and nobody objected." Silence is consent. Before I moved, I now live in Oakland. Before I moved from my Squirrel Hill home of 33 years, my wife Mary and I had a woman who came once a week and did cleaning and basic cleaning in the house. She lived with a partner who was a handyman, did a lot of handyman work, and she helped him. And he died suddenly of a heart attack, and she tried to continue the business. She complained once to me when she was there about the difficulty of hiring good workers. She just couldn't seem to hire good workers. I told her that one of my sons owns a construction firm in New York, upstate New York, and he has 3 good Mexican employees. She quickly said, "I would never hire any Mexicans. They're lazy." I didn't have to pause to think. I replied, "That's a stereotype. There are white American citizens who are excellent workers, and likely some who are lazy. I expect you could find the same with all racial, nationality, and ethnic groups. The 3 Mexicans my son happens to employ are highly skilled, reliable, do quality work, and will continue the work even when he's on vacation." See, I learned from my experience with Bob when we were driving along and I realized we had said nothing, that I was going to make a vow to myself to never more keep silent in the face of something that needed and required and expected an objection. We all need to cultivate sort of an auto response, an "I'll speak up" response, because silence is consent. It's not an easy vow to keep. Haven't we all been in social gatherings and what we call polite company, when someone makes an insensitive or even hateful statement? And by the way, we have a little rotating situation here in our church, and we haven't quite figured out yet that the lights kind of filter on and off from time to time. We've all been in situations where we've heard hateful statements about gays or women or African Americans, not identifying them by name, but saying something that we feel is inappropriate. To counter an offensive statement made in your presence and in the presence of others will be embarrassing to the person, perhaps to other persons, and likely to you. It's so much easier to just keep quiet. Perhaps make a silent promise to yourself that later I'll take this person aside and I'll mention to him that I thought that wasn't an appropriate thing to say. Not too many years ago, I was attending a social event when a person told a joke that was very offensive to African Americans. Some laughed. I spoke up and I said, "Excuse me, but I have to say that I find jokes like that to be offensive and stereotypical." My comment obviously stopped the conversation. People drifted away. But one woman, as she passed me, paused and said, "I'm glad you said that. It's what I was thinking, but I didn't want to say anything. Silence is consent. Many of you remember the Judge Thomas hearings years ago when Anita Hill made her testimony. Hill told the senators, "It's only after a great deal of agonizing that I'm able to talk about these unpleasant matters to anyone except my closest friends. But the fact that she did has made it far easier for the rest of the country to address issues of sexual harassment with a new frankness and understanding." Her testimony cost her a lot of flack and negative reactions for a long time. But Anita Hill said to the committee, "I would have been more comfortable to remain silent. I took no initiative to inform anyone, but when I was asked by a representative of this committee to report my experience, I felt I had to tell the truth. I could not keep silent." Sophie Scholl, a German college student, led the only major act of civil disobedience during the Second World War in Germany. Sophie and her fellow students, members of a group called the White Rose, published underground anti-Nazi materials calling for the peaceful overthrow of Hitler. A timely and provocative play, sometimes given in this country, explores the role that German citizens played in the rise of Hitler. This play examines the moral strength and courage that this small group of German students had as they risked their lives for a righteous and dangerous cause. Reading about that play brought to mind a recent trip I took to Europe. My daughter has retired, and she and her husband have decided to retire in Portugal. So I went over in late March to visit her. I flew first to Munich, and she met me there. We spent about a half a day touring through Dachau. We were fortunate to have an excellent guide, a woman who knew her World War history, obviously the history of the camps, and many other relevant things. I thought I knew Second World War history pretty well. I actually lived through it. Yeah, I'm that old. I really am. I was young, but I did live through it. I thought I knew about the camps. You know, there were 4 or 5, I assumed. I knew about Dachau and Auschwitz and so forth. But she said there were as many as 1,000 camps. They were everywhere, most of them very small. And she said, if you hear and read that the average German citizen didn't know there were camps, that's not true. Everybody knew because they were everywhere. And if somebody spoke out, if somebody gave opposition to the Nazi Party, they ended up in the camps. Our tour group was mostly Americans. And it seemed pretty clear to me that she was speaking right to us. She was trying to tell us something. She said, you know, the Nazi Party in Germany, before the Nazi era, was just a small group. There weren't anything anybody worried much about. When they were trying to come into power, nobody really worried about them. Nobody spoke out because they won't last. They're not anything of much significance. But when they came into power and had power in their hands, it was too late. And then she said these very words: silence is consent. You don't think it will happen, and then it does. We can't assume the obvious is obvious. Your experience, your knowledge can have value in a given situation. No one else has your unique perspective. That doesn't mean everything that enters your brain needs to come out through your mouth. But it does mean that it's worth communicating with some discretion the thoughts that you have that bring value to a situation. Part of standing up for what you believe in is learning to be courageous. Courage doesn't mean that you're not afraid. Many courageous people are afraid, but they act in the face of fear because they know it's important. This past Tuesday was the 4th of July. I received in my inbox that morning, I get a lot of these, you probably do too, different bulletins and essays about different things that are happening in the world. And I got one that morning, which made reference to an Independence Day address made by Frederick Douglass in 1852. You've heard of it, I'm sure. He was a well-known black abolitionist. The writer of this article described it as the greatest Independence Day oration ever made. I'd known of it growing up. I'd heard about it in schools, but I never read it. Had you? So I got it out. It's easy to find on Google. And I read it. I was amazed. I was dumbstruck. This was a black man. They didn't use African American back then. This was a black man, born a slave, who grew up in a time when it was illegal to learn to read and write. And yet, in the course of this address, which I read, he quoted internationally known writers, statesmen, poets, the Constitution, the Bible. The very substance of his address was awesome, including an incredible portrayal of the evils of slavery. He did this at no little risk to himself because he was an escaped slave. And the American government, just 2 years before, had passed the Fugitive Slave Law, which made it not only legal but encouraged bounty hunters to roam through the North and find escaped slaves, put them in chains, and take them back to their masters in the South. Now, they were supposed to take the captive to court first. They didn't always. But they were supposed to take them to court, and if they did, it only took 2 witnesses, often paid, to say, yes, this is an escaped slave. And the captive had no right to speak for him or herself and could present no witnesses. This was our American law back in 1852. Frederick Douglass saw his own mother only a few times in his life, became an escaped slave, and had, in fact, to flee to England at one time for a period to be safe. If you've not read this address, I urge you to do so. It's easy to find. Set aside an hour. It's long, but it'll be one of the more valuable hours you'll spend. Frederick Douglass took that personal risk to appear before a huge, almost totally white crowd in Rochester, New York in 1852, 11 years before the slaves were freed by Lincoln, because he knew that silence is consent. A friend of mine, just a couple of days ago, when he happened to see the title of the message I was going to present today, sent me a message reminding me of a song that had been written a number of years ago by Pink Floyd, who used to be a favorite of mine. Remember his music? One of the songs that my friend pointed out was called On the Turning Away. And that song has rather stirring words. Part of the last verse says, "No more turning away from the weak and the weary. It's not just enough to stand and stare. Is it only a dream that there will be no more turning away?" Because I've for years been active in the Lifelong Learning Institute at Carnegie Mellon University, I'm on their campus a lot. Students put up signs and posters from time to time. One day I was walking across campus and I saw a series of signs. Kind of reminded me of the Burma Shave signs. Some of you will remember those from years ago. The first sign said, "First they came for the communists, but I did not speak up because I was not a communist. Then they ignored the handicapped, but I did not speak up because I was not handicapped. Then they criticized the Catholics, but I did not speak up because I was not a Catholic. Then they persecuted the Jews, but I did not speak up because I was not a Jew. Then they shunned the LGBTQs, but I did not speak up because I was not an LGBTQ. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." Silence in the face of persecution or disrespect of others is taken as consent. May we have the courage not to turn away. Our closing hymn is number 168.
Please be seated. As we extinguish the chalice, please join me in reading the words that are spoken at Unitarian Universalist churches and fellowships around the country. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
If you have found freedom here, take it with you into the world. If you have found comfort, go and share it with others. If you have found a new challenge you're willing to accept, make it a part of your life from this day forward. Go with peace in your heart and a resolve to make the world a better place in your mind and your heart.